Hi, everyone. I'm here to talk to you about the end of World War I, which officially ended in 1919. But before we get to that, let's just recap the US's involvement. Remember, the war broke out in 1914, but the United States doesn't get involved until April of 1917. We send additional troops, money, supplies, and really help the Allies then secure victory. So the fighting ends about a year and a half later, in November of 1918. Again, it's going to take about a year for the peace treaty to be worked out, but the fighting ends after just over a year of U.S. fighting. So where does this rank in terms of deadliest U.S. wars? You can see that there were well over 100,000 Americans that lost their lives in World War I, which was devastating, needless to say. But how does this stack up? You can see, for instance, that World War II is going to be even deadlier. Again, in part because we're going to be involved in World War II for a lot longer than what we were in World War I, and we'll study that soon enough. How does this compare to other countries' World War I deaths? Remember, you can see the red circle there that there's over 100,000 Americans that were killed. But look at, for instance, Russia right here. Almost 2 million Russians were killed. You have almost a million British, over a million French. Germans, almost 2 million Germans were killed. Over a million people in Austria-Hungary were killed. So a lot of other countries had far worse death tolls than the United States, again, because they were there fighting for a lot longer than we were. Why do I bring this up? Because that is going to influence how people kind of come to the table to deal with the aftermath of the war and the Treaty of Versailles. The Treaty of Versailles is a Quizlet term, so definitely make sure you know it. Here you can see the Big Four meeting in Versailles at the fabulous palace there right outside Paris. You can see the head of France, the head of here's the head of France, here's the head of the United States, Woodrow Wilson. We've got the head of Italy, and of course the head of Great Britain meeting there to work out the peace treaty. Of course, Austria-Hungary and Germany are not represented there because they lost the war. What are they going to agree to? For one, they're going to agree that Germany must accept sole blame for World War I. It's called the War Guilt Clause. They're going to force Germany to pay massive, massive war reparations to the other allies. Why not Austria-Hungary? Because as part of this, they're going to be broken up. And so Germany is going to, again, have a War Guilt Clause and pay massive, massive war reparations. Thirdly, Germany is going to lose a lot of land. Austria-Hungary, as well as the Ottoman Empire, are going to be broken up. So if you look at the map here, this is before World War I. So notice how extensive Germany was, Austria-Hungary, the Ottoman Empire, which is kind of hidden right here. And now here's a map of after World War I. We get 9 new countries that emerge after World War I. So for instance, we get Poland, Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, Finland, Czechoslovakia, Austria and Hungary become separate countries, Yugoslavia, just to name a few of them. So that's going to be a dramatic difference that is a part of the Treaty of Versailles. We also have a mandate for how to deal with the former Ottoman Empire, including in the Middle East. You can see British are going to influence parts of the Middle East, including Palestine. The French are going to have control of countries, including Syria. So that's all part of the Treaty of Versailles as well. The fourth thing is the German military is going to be demilitarized. It's going to dramatically shrink as a result of the Treaty of Versailles as people are trying to curb another war. And lastly, the most controversial part of the Treaty of Versailles was this League of Nations that is proposed. Article 10 of the treaty proposed this unified peacekeeping organization that would be established and that they would have each other's back should they need to. This was part of Woodrow Wilson's baby. This was part of his 14 points, his plan for peace that he brought to the Treaty of Versailles. Here's a picture of the League of Nations actually in session. If it sounds like the United Nations, it's because it essentially is a precursor to it. But this was kind of what Wilson really wanted. So again, if we go back to those numbers of deaths, why I brought them up, again, you can see that there's a lot of anger towards the losing powers, right? And that kind of explains why there's this massive war reparations, demilitarizing Germany, forcing them to give up land and so forth, breaking up the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Wilson, on the other hand, is kind of looking more towards we got to prevent this from happening in the future. And perhaps that might explain why he was pushing for this League of Nations to curb future world wars. So, like any treaty, then it has to be agreed upon by 2/3 of the Senate. And so there's going to be some people with disagreements over if we should sign this treaty. Henry Cabot Lodge, pictured in this political cartoon, is going to lead a group of senators that are the reservationists. They have some reservations about it. They want to make some amendments to it. We've got the irreconcilables. Those are people that don't want anything to do with the Treaty of Versailles, especially because of Article 10, the League of Nations, feel that we need to be much more isolationist. And lastly, you've got Woodrow Wilson and these people that supported us signing the Treaty of Versailles. And so it is going to be a battle. Needless to say, you see Wilson pictured in this cartoon and Henry Cabot Lodge. Wilson is going to campaign vigorously around the country for like 3 weeks, sometimes giving 3 speeches a day, trying to convince people that we need to sign this Treaty of Versailles. He works himself so hard that actually suffers a massive stroke in the midst of this that almost kills him. And ultimately, the United States is not going to sign the Treaty of Versailles. You can see our hands were kind of tied. We are not going to join the League of Nations. The Americans really reacted against this Treaty of Versailles. You kind of see the pendulum swinging back as people just do not want to get involved in world affairs, even if it was trying to prevent future world wars from happening. So we never actually sign a Treaty of Versailles or join the League of Nations. We sign our own peace treaty that just ends the fighting with the Central Powers. So ultimately, you can see here, this is called the Great War for a reason, because there's just massive casualties that emerge as a result. And especially as it affects Germany, 10% of its population killed and it lost 12% of its land. Remember, they're forced to pay massive war reparations. It's no surprise that Germany kind of becomes a breeding ground for kind of anger and resentment as they suffer from, economic strife, and it's a platform for a guy like Adolf Hitler to take control. And unfortunately, that's going to bring us not that far away into another world war, that being, of course, World War II. We'll talk about that, of course, in another chapter. All right, hope that helps, guys. Take care.